Hey there, and welcome to the Dynamics Hot Dish Podcast, serving up stories and knowledge on Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform. This is what's hot in Dynamics. You're now joining Merlin Schweiger, Liz McGlennon, and Ashley Steiner.
Today we have a guest speaker on, and Jay is here to share his wisdom and expertise on our favorite and most interesting topic, licensing. Jay works for Microsoft as a technical pre-sales manager, and Jay and I go way back. You've been in this space a long time. You were a leader at a Microsoft partner for quite a while, and I'll let you introduce yourself and share a little bit about your background, Jay.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here. So Jay Lendl, live in beautiful Minneapolis, where it's minus 9 degrees here this morning. So, balmy like our North Central typically is this time of year. Been with Microsoft a little over 5 years. As Liz mentioned, prior to that, most of my career was actually in the system integration space. A couple of times in that journey. Once back in 2001, I ran a Dynamics practice, and I got Microsoft Dynamics certified for the primary reason you got a free Xbox back then. It was really cool, and Xboxes were brand new, and I had middle school kids at the time. So I'm like, I got to get an Xbox, so I'll get Dynamics certified on 1.3, so very exciting. And then Liz and I did work together where we did do some Dynamics consulting as well. So, but yeah, since at Microsoft, primarily in the field sales group, now I work for exclusively with FSI. Enterprise accounts is my focus right now.
You want to define FSI for us?
Oh, I'm sorry. Financial services, insurance, cap markets, and banking. So the kind of the largest in the U.S., the top kind of 280 financial services organizations that are headquartered in the United States.
All right, well, I'm going to jump into our fun topic of the hour, licensing. As a pseudo licensing expert my own self, I have to admit that in the questions that I've sent you that I plan to go through, there's a lot of sort of selfish, I would like an answer for these questions. But I think before we dive too far in, I was hoping maybe just from a high level, like if you could outline, I'm thinking mostly about like the Power Platform licensing, like the Powerapps and Power Automate licenses, and the Dynamics 365 licensing, and sort of, I don't know, like how those two relate to each other or don't.
Okay. I mean, let's start with Dynamics, because I think about it as our finished products, right? Because I think as most of your audience has come through in your existing conversations over time, Dynamics is built on the Power Platform. So I think let's start with what we call the finished products, or the true, kind of applications as a service, if you will. So across Dynamics, sales, marketing, customer service, field service, and then I'm going to also throw in, and I don't know if it's as common in yours, as our finance and operations platform as well, right? Predominantly is sold on a per user basis, right? I'm going to set marketing aside for a minute. So take marketing out of that. Sales, customer service, field service, and all of our finance and operations supply chain is predominantly licensed on a per user basis. And actually sales and customer service both have a per device licensing. So if you have a staff that works, 3 shifts, 24 hours a day, you can actually do per device based licensing for both sales and customer service. Little known fact. Actually, most people don't actually know that. And we don't see it that often because not that many organizations have 24-hour operations that share a computer. Right. And so that would be the requirement. So, in the past, we saw it in, some pure call center types of solution, or physical offices where they literally have staff, kind of coming through using the new systems. I ain't seen a lot of that right now, right? Most people have moved that function to home, and I don't know that it'll ever go back, in. But just there is that option.
Marketing. I have a question there before
please.
You keep going. Is there a reason why there's not a per device option for field service?
There just was never the use case. You never saw a device. Now, like on the warehouse side, for example, which we do have a per device around some of the warehouse management in our ERP platform, right? So it's just been based on need, and we just haven't seen that kind of field service technician, sort of sharing their computer, right? I mean, it's typically been a mobile device, and they just take it and go. So you just don't have that fixed location aspect of field service that often. So purely based on, demand, feedback, that kind of stuff. So that's sales, customer service, field service, and kind of our broad ERP and finance. There's some exceptions. I'm trying to keep it at a reasonable aspect. Marketing and our customer insights platform. Customer insights being our kind of customer data platform. They're really purely capacity based, right? So marketing is based on contacts or interactions, right? And so that's how our marketing platform is licensed, which is what you would see on most marketing automation platforms in the industry. And then our customer insights is purely based on how many unified profiles you're going to have. Doesn't matter how much data comes in, it's how many resulting customer profiles, either business profiles or contact profiles. You license your capacity for customer insights based on, you know, true usage, if you will. So at a high level, that's kind of how we think about the dynamics. Now, where people come in, and this was some of the changes of the past, we used to have this idea of a hero SKU, which was our customer engagement SKU, which is where sales, customer service, field service, and at that time, project service automation were all included. Based on our customers, we really didn't see that many people using multiple workloads, and so those end up being individual workloads, so we could kind of manage that individual workload cost. So we have the idea of a base license, and then the ability to do an attach. So say you have a user that needs both sales and customer service, one of them will be the base, one of them will be the attach. So they'd license sales plus a customer service attach, and the attach one is much less expensive than the base one, right? So that the costs combined are, you know, kind of fair market value, if you will. So base plus attach. If somebody needs three, they just two attaches, right? Is kind of that, you hear about that base plus attach. So that's kind of how that works. Any questions? I know that's a lot, but hopefully it gives you kind of a baseline on sort of those finished products around Dynamics.
Good for me.
Yeah, I don't have any questions.
That makes sense.
So I can start a little bit on the Power Platform, right? And so when I think about the Power Platform, I think about it in its broadest sense, right? So Power BI, Power Apps, Power Automate, and Power Virtual Assistant. And then under it being Dataverse and connectors, right?
Right.
And so if we start, I'm gonna leave Power BI out today. It's a topic on itself. A lot of our customers who have Office 365 E5 license, they just get Power BI Pro is included with an E5 license. Otherwise, people can buy a Power BI Pro, or they can buy Power BI Premium, which is a consumption-based license, is how Power BI is licensed. Power Apps, which is obviously typically the way people enter into Power Apps, is really sold now in three ways. We have the idea of a Power Apps per user, which is you assign that to a user just like any other Office 365 license, and they now have access or capacity. I mean, let's set rights aside and user profiles and all that. They can have access to unlimited applications, right? 1, 5, 1,000. We don't care. The per user license is access to any Power Apps applications in their tenant. So that's the Power Apps per user license, okay? Power Apps per app. We've had a couple of different versions of this over the last 3 years. The current version of the Power Apps per app license on the market is a single app, one application. And so the idea is, think of it as a pass. It's an application pass. And actually in the user interface, it's actually an app pass. And so the idea being is that the action of sharing a Power App is when an app pass gets consumed. So let's say I build an app this afternoon and I want to share it with the three of you. In the app maker experience, I share it with you three. At that point, I've just consumed 3 app passes because you now have access to that application. Nowhere in any system do I have to assign you that license as a user. So this is different than a lot of the other Microsoft licensing. There's no actual license assignment. It is consumed at time of sharing. And then if you're unshared or you're removed from AD, that token, that pass is put back into the pool. So that's kind of how Power App per app license really are managed differently and consumed differently. Okay, so
And
that's the
Jay,
per app.
what counts as an app? So is it a model-driven app, Canvas app, Portal?
Portal,
Like
any three of those. Any of those. If you have an app that is a model-driven app with an embedded Canvas app, that's one app, right? So it's an application context, if you will, is sort of an app pass would get consumed. Okay, but yeah, you brought up portals as well, so that is going to be an app pass. So you do a employee self-service of some sort, that's going to be an app pass for that user as well. So that's kind of your buy the license for power per user, for per app, and do that assignment. The third option, which is a little bit newer, we just launched it on November 1st, is pay as you go for Powerapps. Pay as you go for Powerapps allows a customer who has an Azure subscription to actually associate a Powerapps instance, a Dataverse instance, with their Azure subscription and be able to do their billing in their Azure subscription. And so we've seen a lot of our enterprise accounts that have very large Azure commitments can now consume those dollars, not just with Azure services, but also Powerapps. Okay, so at a really high level, that's kind of how Powerapps is licensed. Now, the big question is where does Power Automate fit into this from a licensing standpoint? Powerapps license, any of those three, includes Power Automate in the context of the application. Okay, sure. So the meaning being, so if I build this UI and I need to go do some connectors, whether I'm going to go hit Exchange or SharePoint or a premium connector, I'm going to go hit Salesforce. I don't know why anybody would do that. Maybe they're going to go hit.
Idea.
Right. Maybe they're going to hit their HR platform or just an Azure SQL database. Is that all of that connector that's hitting that UI, all of that Power Automate is included. That flow off of that UI that's triggered from the UI, all of that Power Automate functionality and those flows are included in the Powerapps pricing.
Is there a limit though on how many times that flow can run?
Yeah, there are daily limits on a lot of aspects of that stack, but yeah, at the end of the day, there are some limitations, yeah, they're documented on the doc site under Powerapps. Actually, I have it up, but I was trying to think. Basically, if you search on docs for request limits, Powerapps request limits, you'll get a page of where some of those are. And I think one of the questions, Merlin, you sent over is, there were some changes to some of those limits recently. And basically, we look at all the back-end telemetry of customers. I mean, we don't look at their data. We look at their telemetry of how they're using it. And like our standard Powerapps per user and our Dynamics per user was like 25,000 requests a day. And so they felt like, 90x% of our customers were falling under that, never having any problems. They've seen some growth. So they increased that from 25,000 a day to 40,000 a day, for example. So they continue to watch to make sure that it's an exception. Ashley, to your question, we really want those to be exceptional situations. Those exceptions tend to be when people are using it for service accounts, right? They have some back-end process that's doing basically some, true ETL types of aspects, and they're using a service account. And so we kind of reserve the right to limit that because, we don't want to create what we call a noisy neighbor, right, within our tenant strategy that can just affect us. So that's where you can leverage like a per flow license or some additional service capacity that allows you to go to higher API if you need to. So there's ways to scale that up, but there is some limitations on the base SKU. So Powerapps, Power Automate in the inclusion of it. And then our Power Virtual Agent platform, which is, think about that as, any chatbot, right? Internal, external. Our Power Virtual Agent platform is built on our Azure Bot Framework, which is in use by thousands of customers doing millions and millions of conversations every day. In this kind of theme of lower code maker experience, we created a new front end and some monitoring tools, and that's what Power Virtual Agent is. And so that's licensed purely based on sessions. There's no per se user license. It's the makers. Actually, there's a free license that you assign for people who are going to design chatbots. And then the consumption is purely based on session quantity on a monthly basis. There's basically a meter, and you license how much capacity you want on a monthly basis. So that's kind of it across. The next big question I usually see come up then is, so I bought Dynamics, right? My customization and configuration now is done in Powerapps, right? From a UI standpoint. So what's included with Dynamics? And so my short answer is, Dynamics includes Powerapps in the context of Dynamics and Power Automate in the context of Dynamics. So the ability to configure, customize, extend, and integrate your Dynamics instance is fully included so that you can use all the Powerapps and Power Automate, what we call premium services. That's all included with your Dynamics license. Doesn't allow you to go stand up standalone Powerapps and Power Automate in another instance, but it does in the context of the Dynamics application.
Makes sense. What about the other way around? So I've got Powerapps licenses and I've got some Dynamics users. How close can I get to Dynamics with my Powerapps license?
It's a good question. It is coming up more and more because, again, if you look at the value of our stack, as we all know with Microsoft, there's usually more than one way to do some things, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes there's many. There is a context that we have, and again, on our doc site of restricted entities. And that's very specifically on what Powerapps can do against Dynamics. So if, like you said, let's say you've got, Dynamics stood up, you've got some use cases, let's say in sales, that you're leveraging Dynamics for kind of classic CRM standpoint, is can you use a Powerapps license to hit that? And the answer is yes, but in a limited way, right? So and I break it down into two or three categories. Number one is you lose all the UI stuff, all the beauty that comes with Dynamics on the pre-built UI, all the navigation, views, dashboards, all that pre-built, taking the idea of a lead and converting it into a contact, an account, an opportunity, all of that comes with the model-driven UI and all the pre-built functionality of Dynamics. If you hit a Dynamics instance with Powerapps, you're only hitting Dataverse. You're not hitting any of the application logic. So yes, you can hit it. You have to reference the restricted table because there are some of the fields you cannot use with a Powerapp. I mean, we do limit that. And think about those as some of the more complex calculated. So a lot of the stuff in field service around scheduling, for example, you're not going to be able to hit that. Entitlements, knowledge articles, these are all restricted. You can't hit them from a Powerapp. Can you hit account, contact, leads, opportunities? Absolutely, you can. But again, you're getting the benefit of Dataverse. You're just not going to get any of the benefit of all the user functionality. Again, think in the UI, all the process-driven UI elements of moving an opportunity through the sales stages. You're not going to have access to any of that in a Powerapp. That's only going to be in the Dynamics model-driven UI.
Jay, do you have any advice, like if we have a listener it's a new implementation, they're trying to decide if Dynamics licensing or Powerapps licensing is the right fit and they're unsure, do you have any recommendation or like general advice to give them on that decision?
Yes, partly is if you go to the Dynamics license, you're going to get all the R&D that's happening now and in the future that's specifically around those more finished use cases. So if you're going into a sales organization that has the concepts of leads, moving into opportunities, being able to manage a pipeline, have goals, have manager views, all of that's just out of the box, right? So if you're going to use Powerapps, you're going to own building all of that. Now, if you then want to upscale that a little bit and say you want to leverage some of our sales insights capability, right? Recommendations around next best actions, email follow-ups, pull in some LinkedIn data and do some of those kind of things. You're not ever going to rebuild that in Powerapps. You shouldn't, right? That'd just be a bad idea. So partly is how aligned are you to actually needing a full-featured version of that solution, whether it's sales or customer service. Where this came up, Liz, really recently is we had a customer that had 40,000 independent agents, and they were using a competitor's platform, full CRM, wealth management in their financial cloud, right? And so it was very heavy. And when we started the conversation, I looked at it and said, if we do Dynamics full on, it's going to also feel heavy. There's a lot of greatness that comes with that heaviness, but they wanted to narrow it down in a way that I knew it causes some challenges with any full CRM platform, that if you try disabling stuff to really narrow it down, eventually you start coming into problems because the platform needs all of that functionality, right? That's how it works. And so we looked at it and said, you don't need a CRM. What you really just want is a lightweight contact management and solution, not a CRM. It wasn't, they didn't care about opportunities. It wasn't anything about the sales process. It was literally managed contacts. So we replaced, a very large spend for these 40,000 users with a canvas lightweight application that had about 5 primary screens for a fraction of the cost to do dynamics, as well as a fraction of the cost of the product that they were on. But it did exactly what they wanted, and they didn't see that ongoing value of what we're doing in R&D for all that finished product capability. They really wanted the platform. They wanted the low code, pro code platform that Powerapps would deliver them, embedded with AD, leveraging Azure security, and all of the greatness that comes by Powerapps sitting on top of Azure. That's what they saw the value in. We did leverage Dataverse and a lot of these pre-built entities / tables and all that, but that's a use case that we saw. That if it's super narrow, sometimes that's a reason to say, that might make more sense. But customer has to understand it's on them now. They're going to own sort of that core sort of process side of that. There'll still be updates to the Power Platform for them, but none of them will be unique necessarily to their features that they built out. Does that make sense, Liz?
Yeah, it's a great use case. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. And it was a good win for us from one of our competitors. So it was kind of fun.
It's always nice. It's always nice to win from the competitors.
Nice to win.
So I'm actually looking through the list of questions that I'd had, and I feel like you've actually covered the vast majority of them. The only thing we haven't talked about is the Dynamics team member.
Does that still exist, Merlin? Are you sure there's still a team member license?
I think so. I feel like I just saw it in some document, but I don't really understand when would I buy a Dynamics team member versus just a Powerapps per user and get mostly the same features? I don't actually know.
Yeah, I mean, it plays a little bit in what we're talking about. So to where you ended that question, why team members versus Powerapps, you're back to pre-built functionality, right?
Sure.
Again, even if you're going to do Powerapps, you're going to have to build all of that navigation, all of the just standard views, putting, all the things that the model-driven app get. The big change started October 2019. I mean, everyone's like, oh, did this just change? Like, no, actually, we announced this change in October 2019. It's just taken a while for some customers through their renewals. Our use rights for customers, when they buy a product, whatever the use rights for that were in place at that time are what they have until their next renewal as an organization. So we literally have customers right now because of that change. And then we even had some people who in there, although this change happened in October of 2019, in January of 2020, and so we extended some of those ability to still do some of the old licensing models. So we'll be dealing with this for about another year for customers who are going through these renewals. Team members was one of those changes that changed from customer engagement plan to the separate workloads is, again, what started October 19. And actually, there was quite a bit of the Powerapps and Power Automate changes in October of 2019. So that was kind of a big kind of change of the strategy on how the licensing works based on customer feedback. Team members. So what is in place today, all that agreement side apart, if today you add team members into your license, the use case for team members is kind of this idea. And again, this was based on customer feedback that say you had a core sales organization that had 120 people in it. Then you had the managers, then you maybe had leadership, and then you had other roles in the organization that just wanted access to the data, right? They didn't want to, they're not going to work the opportunities, they're not progressing them, they're not doing that work, but they'd like visibility. So that was where the idea from the very beginning, a team member saying, license your core with the full license, and then use the team members to just give a bunch of other people access to the data, right? I'm somebody over in some other part, but I just want to be able to look up contacts or see what the state of our business is or our pipeline, being able to see all those dashboards and everything else that's built out kind of initially on a read-only basis. But then team member also allows the ability to do some record updates, right? Some CRUD functions the team members do provide for, but it's limited. The big change that came out in the last year is that a team member can no longer hit the regular Dynamics application. There are 3 very specific team member applications now, and those are the apps that they have to hit. Pros and cons. Number 1 is they can still get to all the data. Con is you now have 2 applications that you're maintaining. The primary one that maybe the sales organization is doing, and then the sales team member application that specifically, this is a hard enforced. There's a lot of things we don't do in our platform that are hard enforced. 1 gig storage available to create an instance is one. Team members is another. There's only a couple more. And so, if a team member tries to go to the URL of your standard Dynamics instance, it's going to say you don't have rights or you don't have license or you don't have something. It's going to stop you. Okay. So there's a separate URL for the team member application, which can be configured. The limitation is a team member license can only have the base plus 15 custom tables / entities. So there is limitations. You can't just rebuild what you did for the full user. It is a limited application, but can be configured and customized. And so that's the use case now for the current team member license that's in play. And there's again, in the dockside, you can see where the limitation, and it's really more the pivot being is what entities does a team member have the ability. They can update a contact. They can activity. A lot of the activity stuff is things that they can do updates and create activities, for example, a team member license. But again, they can't progress an opportunity, for example. So it is limited, but it's again, expanding the use so other people have access to the data and the reports. I would put it in that kind of category.
So Jay, just to clarify, you couldn't build a new model-driven app and grant a team member user access to it.
It has to literally one of those 3 applications. That is what you start with, and then you configure that application from there.
And what are the 3? Sales, customer service, and?
Yeah, it's called customer service team member, sales team member, and project resource hub, which would have been kind of built in those PSA, project service automation days. So those are the 3 published applications. I'll give you a little glimpse going forward on this, but before I do that, that's kind of what's out there right now on Team Member Edition.
I remember when that change was made and there was some panic among the community.
It is because we had a lot of customers that, the big change was I need another app. They like the idea of the team member license, but again, up until that time of 2019, a team member license could hit your primary Dynamics instance. Right. You just had to put the security role in place to limit, what
kind of honor system
table. Well, good or bad, we have a lot of ours is the responsibility of our customers to understand enough about the license to assign user roles that will be compliant. Mm-hmm. Yep.
I think it made it easier though, so that the customer doesn't have to make sure it's compliant. I think
now they don't. You're right.
The apps, yep. In my opinion, it makes it easier.
Yeah, it's more predictable. You know what you're getting. You know what the intent is, so you can be a lot more specific with the usage. Yeah. Where this team member piece is going is we're gonna pre-build more functionality in Teams, right? The Teams user interface. So during this calendar year, you're going to see some release of some, not like exactly mapping up to those current team member apps that I was talking about, but it might even be smaller segments of what do we see as applicable use cases that when you're in Teams, you might want to just look at an opportunity and update an opportunity. Be able to see what cases are open. So there's going to be some very specific kind of smaller, kind of sub apps, if you will, within customer service, within sales, that you literally are going to just look like Teams. We're not just taking these apps and embedding those in Teams, which you can do today, right? You can just put a URL in
Mhm.
and you can just have Teams be a browser at the end of the day, which we have a lot of customers do that, not just with Dynamics, but with Power Apps in general, right? Just embedding Power Apps in the Teams UI. We're building some apps that are just going to look like Teams, but they're going to they're going to be pre-built, provided by Microsoft, where it's going to go after specific functionality on the Dynamics backend. So I think when we do that, we'll continue to update what the team member license model is, and more of it's just going to be included. If you own Teams, you're going to own team member access as long as it's embedded in Teams. So, and
nice.
that's actually been published. There's not all the details or the when, so I'm only sharing what's publicly available. But this, I think, will be interesting for customers when they say, okay, we live in Teams. Can we just surface more of these, capabilities? And Microsoft provide more of that tooling to just connect into some of those kind of use cases. So that will be coming in this calendar year.
So we don't get any like sneak preview announcements.
I know. I'm like,
with the
you can't
community?
break any NDA stuff on a podcast. Come on, Jay.
No, I had to clear all this. I wrote out every answer that I was going to have, and I had to get it approved.
That's
No,
no
a lot
fun.
of this is all in our licensing guides. I just happen to read them, and most people don't. So.
Well, they're long.
Well, I guess that kind of leads me to my
Yeah.
question is, as an end user or customer, I've always been on that side of it. And I don't want to say that the licensing is difficult, right? But it's lengthy, right? It's a very long document to go through it and trying to piece it all together. What resources are out there to help customers or end users make sense of it? Obviously, listening to this podcast is one.
Yeah.
But what else is out there?
I mean, I have seen, when I do Bing searches, I will find, where people have tried to demystify, especially when some of the larger changes, sometimes we'll publish, just sort of some of those delta changes, right? But I'll see some partners who will, do a really good job of, kind of really focusing on the change, right? What was the change? I don't always know why, and sometimes we don't exactly know why. But I definitely had done some searches in the past that I've shared out because we don't always have that level of detail that we can send. So I would say number one is just look for and do some searches on that. Number two is whoever that as a customer, whoever your licensing partner is, right? They should be able to help, right? I'm not saying they're experts, but they should be able to help. It's a place to start. And a lot of them have some of their Microsoft licensing specialists on their team. So they'll kind of have their general rep that works with you as a customer. And then, usually behind the scenes, they've got folks that, kind of support their various products that they sell. And so, because I work with some of those, at least in larger accounts. And so hopefully they're doing enough of that they can help everybody, right? So that's one place I think we get some scale is through our licensing reseller partners. Some system integrators, if a customer is working with somebody to help in the implementation, many of those, because they run into this a lot, they'll have at least familiarity, kind of the big blocks, not necessarily all the details. But again, I think, Ashley, to your point, a lot of times it's just you get started, then there is some drill down. Well, what about in this case? And there's a whole side of this where, how do you get super creative? But those tend to come in on a lot of the much bigger, types of situations where there are, thousands of users or whatever. And then I think the third option is, if you are in the channel of, where you have a direct relationship with Microsoft, reach out to Microsoft, right? They can get you to people on the team that probably know a whole heck of a lot more than I do about our licensing, that should be able to help, in your specific context. I mean, we don't usually cover all of this with a customer at any one time, right? Because they're usually like, well, we're trying to do this thing. Well, let's get really focused on what you're trying to do. Right? Because there's things that I haven't talked about that I know are where the details comes in of, some of the add-ons that we have, right? So I own Dynamics Sales Enterprise, but I do want to use some of that new AI ML capabilities. Tell me about the sales insights, and that's a SKU, and there's a price for that. What's included with that versus what comes with the base product? versus customer service insights, which is just included, right? I mean, that is hard to decipher, but I would say the best case is understand kind of the scope of that, and then kind of walk through that channel, doing some searching, talk to your reseller, and then if you can, connect into somebody at Microsoft to just try to get some clarity. But I think when you're bringing that, be as focused on that as you can. Of what are you trying to do? What do you need? And I'm sure through one of those three, you can find that kind of guidance.
Yeah,
or they can reach out to you, and they can reach out to you, and then you can ping me, and then we can try to fill that gap somehow.
I was gonna say, we're not just gonna throw your email in the show notes and say, hey, reach out to Jay if you have questions.
But feel free to
I get enough of that. I get enough of that
comment.
internally. I get plenty of that here, by the way. So
I feel like it'd be great if there was, I don't know, a Power Virtual Agent chatbot somewhere that Microsoft had that you could just ask it licensing questions.
Think of how hard that would be to set up.
Oh, it would be impossible to maintain.
What a nightmare.
So I always wonder. So I'll give you one non-external fact. We actually have a license queue chatbot internally. It's not using PVA, but it is using Azure Bot Framework. It's been around for 3-4 years, and I don't know if there are hopes or someday that it answers, to your point, Liz. There's so much complexity in this, and you got to be careful if anything just answers a question, because it could just be wrong, right? I mean, statistically, it could just be wrong. But I always wonder, like, if you train that long enough, could you just make that available external? So yes, we internally have some of those kind of tools, but I think just due to risk and confusion, it's tricky to put something like that external right now.
Well, you have to think about, like, at the rate in which it changes too. Like,
Right.
will it ever have long enough to really figure it out, or will it have changed by then?
Yeah, I know one of the questions, Merlin, was what do we see? And I think the big changes are over, but I think we'll continue to see incremental. I mean, I'll throw a really small example, right? It's like the Powerapps license now, as of about 2 weeks ago, nobody noticed, but we now include 500 AI Builder service credits with every user license. Didn't used to, we just threw that in. And that's based, again, on feedback that AI Builder always came with Powerapps, but no capacities. You couldn't do anything with it. It was in the maker experience, right? You could pick a model, you could just drag it into an application. You train it with 10 images and you could start capturing forms data, right? I mean, that's the idea with AI Builder, but no capacity. So right away, customer, well, I can't use it. Like, well, now you'll get 500 per user, and that'll be pooled at the tenant. So it's a place to start. I think we'll continue to look at packaging. Some things will merge, some things will separate. And I think that comes both from us watching telemetry of how the tools or products are used, and then direct customer feedback is definitely, Paygo is all customer feedback. I mean, that absolutely customers saying, I got my Azure, I have my Azure commitment. Why can't I have my Powerapps draw down on my Azure? You just told me it's all built on Azure. The beauty of the platform is it's all Azure. Like, why can't I now decrement against my Azure commitment? Like, now you can. We had to build a lot of the plumbing so that it worked. Azure has policies, so you can do like HR department. Now Powerapps can be falling. We just had to have a lot of those things in place before we could start doing Paygo. But I mean, that was all based on customer feedback.
Interesting.
So, Liz, Merlin, do you have any other questions before we get to our classic, our final fun question?
I think it's time.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Jay, I know you're from Minnesota, and so I know you know what a hot dish is. So the question is, drum roll, what is your favorite hot dish?
I thought that question might be coming.
We only ask it to every guest.
Yeah, no, I thought about it for a few minutes, and I thought, there's been some that I like, but there's one that we make almost once every month, and it's tater tot hot dish, right? Tater tots, corn, hamburger, and some cream of something.
Whatever you have in the cupboard.
Exactly. So I'd say tater tot hot dish is pretty much, we're empty nesters now, so my wife and I, definitely a comfort food at least once a month has to be tater tot hot dish.
I actually just had tater tot hot dish for the first time in a really long time. Like, I had it all the time growing up, and I got really sick of it. And I was like over at my parents' like a month or so ago. It's winter, and so you're kind of like, hot dishes are nice. And then I'm like, I'm hungry. And my mom's like, I have leftover tater tot hot dish. And I'm like, sure, I'll have some. And she's like, you
Yeah.
used to hate this. And I'm like, yeah, I haven't had it in years. Like, it sounds great.
My wife and I have both had COVID at least once in the last couple of years, and I don't know, I think for both of us, our taste is not the same anymore. I don't know if it's in our brain. I don't know where it is, but meat does not taste the same for us as it used to. And so Tanya, my wife, the last time, she's like, I think next time I'm going to make tater tot hot dish without the hamburger on the bottom, because she really likes all the other flavors, but the hamburger just doesn't taste as good as it used to. So
Okay.
we
Are
might
you going
have
to
to try
add
that out.
anything else in there?
I don't know, because we're like, what
more
would you
veggies?
put? I
More
don't know.
vegetables? That
Yeah,
sounds kinda
yeah.
gross too.
No, so again, hamburger kind of helps it come out of the pan. So I don't know what else we'll do, but so that's our strategy. So
You guys have a special tater tot hot dish recipe that you have, or just kind of make it up as you go?
ours is pretty basic. Yeah, it's really those 4 things, and that's it. And I like to overcook. I like crunchy tater tots on the top. So
And lots of tater tots.
even when I warm it up, that's going back in it's not a microwave thing, right? It's going back in the oven or in the what's the other little fast
toaster
cooker?
oven.
Air
Something
fryer?
like it. Yeah, air fryer. So you get it nice and that top stays dry.
Yeah, you
So-
can't have soggy tots.
No,
Sorry,
no,
tots
no.
first.
I like the crisp tots. I'm right there with you.
Okay.
Well, cool. Well, I hope this was helpful. I hope that, we hit most of this stuff. So
Very helpful. Thanks for joining us today, Jay. We appreciate your time.
absolutely. It's always fun.
Thank you for listening to the Dynamics Hot Dish Podcast. For additional content and previous episodes, check out our website at dynamicshotdish.com, follow us on Twitter at dynamicshotdish, and subscribe to our podcast for notifications. Thanks. See you next time.